Perfect thumbs up. Alright, part 3, 1500 words of Bob Dylan loses it during 60 Minutes interview with Ed Bradley, in the main AP News style, continuing naturally from earlier parts. Here's your article. Part 3, Bob Dylan loses it during 60 Minutes interview with Ed Bradley. In the aftermath of the now infamous 60 Minutes interview that left audiences stunned and producers scrambling, Bob Dylan's representatives have moved quickly to contain the fallout. The legendary singer-songwriter's exchange with Ed Bradley, tense, unpredictable, and at times explosive, has become one of the most talked about television moments of the year. Sources close to the production describe a scene that swung between candid reflection and sudden flashes of frustration, giving a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the mind of a notoriously private artist. According to crew members present during the taping, the atmosphere shifted the moment the cameras began rolling again after a short break. Dylan, visibly restless, seemed irritated by what he reportedly called the same old questions about fame, faith, and the meaning of his lyrics. Ed Bradley, known for his calm and steady demeanor, attempted to redirect the discussion toward Dylan's recent projects, but the tension was already thick. He just wasn't having it, one crew member told the Associated Press. You could feel the air change in the room. Bradley asked Dylan about his relationship with the public, whether he still felt misunderstood after all these years. Dylan paused for several seconds, his expression unreadable, before responding with a sharp tone. "People don't need to understand me," he said, his voice low but firm. "They just need to listen. That's all it ever was. You don't need to pick me apart like a science experiment." The remark reportedly caught Bradley off guard. For a brief moment, Dylan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, while the crew watched in silence. Producers say Dylan's frustration wasn't directed at Bradley personally but rather at the idea of being analyzed, something he's resisted since his earliest days in the public eye. "Bob's never liked being put under a microscope," a former tour manager explained. "He's an artist who believes the work should speak for itself. When interviews start dissecting his motives or his message, that's when he shuts down or pushes back." The interview continued for another 20 minutes, during which Dylan's mood fluctuated between reflective and defiant. When Bradley brought up the legacy of "Blowin' in the Wind," Dylan's expression hardened again. "That song's not a slogan," he said curtly. "It's a question. People turned it into something else. They always do." According to multiple sources, the exchange that followed was the breaking point. When Bradley asked if Dylan still felt responsible for being the voice of a generation, the musician reportedly leaned forward and snapped, "I never asked to be anyone's voice. Don't put that on me." His tone rose sharply, echoing in the small studio. "I wrote songs. That's it. You want a preacher? Go to church." Witnesses say the room went silent for several moments before Dylan removed his microphone and stood up. "That's enough for me," he said, glancing briefly at Bradley before walking off the set. The cameras kept rolling for a few seconds as producers signaled to cut the feed. The abrupt end left both Bradley and the production team stunned. After Dylan left, Bradley reportedly turned to his crew and sighed. "Well," he said quietly, "that's Bob." Those in attendance say he wasn't angry, only surprised at how quickly the conversation had unraveled. "Ed was a pro," said one producer. "He's interviewed everyone from presidents to prisoners. He didn't take it personally. He just knew he had witnessed something raw." In the hours that followed, Dylan's team issued a short statement clarifying that the artist had been uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. They emphasized that he respected Ed Bradley and 60 Minutes, but had chosen to end the interview to maintain his creative integrity. CBS declined to comment on the specifics, but insiders say the network has been debating how much of the footage to air. When a condensed version of the segment finally aired, it was heavily edited, omitting the walk-off and some of Dylan's most heated remarks. Instead, the broadcast focused on his upcoming tour and his reflections on songwriting. Still, sharp-eyed viewers noticed the abrupt cuts and the slightly uneasy tone of Bradley's closing remarks. Online forums and social media quickly filled with speculation about what had been left out. Music journalists were quick to weigh in. Rolling Stone called the encounter a rare, combustible moment in modern television, while Variety described it as the collision of two icons, one seeking truth, the other resisting definition. Fans were divided. Some praised Dylan for standing his ground, while others criticized him for being dismissive toward one of the most respected interviewers in journalism. Despite the uproar, those close to Dylan say this moment wasn't about ego, it was about exhaustion. He's been answering the same questions for 60 years, one longtime collaborator said. Everyone wants to decode him, but he's never played that game. Sometimes he just wants to talk about the music, and when people start digging into mythology, he walks. In the days following the broadcast, Dylan retreated from public view, reportedly spending time at his California home. A friend described him as calm, reflective, and done with the noise. When asked whether he regretted how things ended, the source said, "Bob doesn't do regret. He moves on." Meanwhile, CBS's 60 Minutes has seen a spike in replay views, with clips circulating widely online. For a generation unfamiliar with Dylan's volatility, it was an introduction to his complex relationship with fame and the press. "It's easy to forget that Dylan's always been unpredictable," noted a cultural critic. This wasn't a meltdown, it was a reminder that he's still fiercely independent. For Ed Bradley, who had previously described Dylan as one of the most enigmatic figures I've ever sat across from, the interview would stand as one of the most memorable of his career. "You never really interview Bob Dylan," Bradley once said in a later segment. "You just try to keep up with him." In the end, the clash between the journalist and the musician encapsulated the very tension that has defined Dylan's public life. The artist struggled to preserve mystery in a world that demands explanation. Whether the moment was seen as defiance or authenticity depends largely on who's watching. But one thing remains certain: Bob Dylan, even after decades in the spotlight, refuses to be predictable, refuses to conform, and refuses, as ever, to play by anyone else's script.